So this is VSCOCam. Some people call it VSCO. And I wanted to show you how I edit using this app here. So we're going to start by just opening up this photo of the fern. The ones beneath are edited already, I believe. So I'm going to open up this one by double tapping it. And the second button here, the sliders, if you click that, there's a bunch of different things that you can do to your photo. There are different presets here. So we have some black and white presets here. I'm going to click through them so you can see what they all do. So usually what I do when you're first getting acquainted with the app is find that one that roughly looks like the feel of the images you want. And there's also more under shop that you can pay for. The feel of the images I want is roughly this C1. Now if you double tap one of these presets, there's the name of the preset underneath, and then right now it's at 12 strength. Now you can go from 0, which is not even being applied at all, that's our basic photo, and all the way up to 12. I usually find that I'm happy around like a 5 or a 6 depending on the photo. I'm going to put this one at 6 and hit the check mark. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit this little arrow right at the bottom, and that brings up another menu. So we were under the preset button, the one that's beige right now. Now next to it is this little wrench, and that's going to be where we do some more technical adjustments. So I'm going to click that, and here we have is the first one is the sun and its exposure. So you can raise the exposure, you can lower the exposure. On the crazy end of the scale, this is the difference. Usually I bump up my photos by +1 or +2. I'm going to leave this one at +1. Next one is the contrast. So you can play with all these to see what they do, but you can go +4 for crazy contrast. You can make it a little more muted, once again depending on what you feel best suits your brand and your feed. And I'm going to hit the check mark again. Here we have an easy way to straighten, rotate. We can straighten like that. You can go 90-degree angles. I'm going to hit X to not save any of those changes. Here we can fix the horizontal perspective. So this is really helpful if you're shooting like a building and you want to straighten it out a little bit. I don't really ever use that. Here's just the cropping tool, which is really simple. So Instagram now allows you to post photos in 4:3 format either way, or the traditional square, of course. I usually stick to square, but sometimes another crop comes in handy. Here we have clarity, so that brings a little bit more clarity to the edges. I don't know if you can see that a little bit. Yeah, you can on that end. It's not really something I use, but you can experiment once again. Here we have sharpening. Sometimes I'll go up to 1 or 2. I don't know if you guys can see that difference there. It's kind of subtle. That's not subtle. So I'll do maybe +1. And then here's the saturation. We can increase that for these crazy neon ferns. So you're just going to go throughout this and play with these different things just to give you an idea of how I edit. What I would do is right after I change the exposure, I go into temperature, and I usually will adjust this temperature. I like really warm images, so I'll bump it up by 1 or 2. And next to the temperatures, there's this little eyedropper. And that does the tint, so it goes from either a green tint to a magenta tint. So I'm going to show you the green first off, makes it a little bit greener. And the magenta is really subtle in this photo actually, but I usually bump things towards the magenta side because I like that look on my feed. This little person is the skin tone fixer. So obviously there's no skin tones in this image of mine, but you can still see kind of how it affects the image when you have people for sure. So this is a vignette, which will add the darkening in the corners. It's not something I'm personally a fan of, so I never use it. And then down here would be a fade. If things are a little bit too bright, you can make it a little bit faded. So once I've done this is about all I would do to this image. You can hit the arrow at the bottom again. So if you hit this little third arrow here, that'll undo the last thing you did, so we're not going to press that. But then if you go over to these 2 lines, you can see the exact formula you've used on this image. So I can see I increased the temperature by 2, the tint, the contrast, and the exposure all by 2. I didn't really crop it, and this is the preset that I used. So you can choose to undo all. I'm of course not going to do that. I'm going to hit this down arrow, and I'm going to hit the check mark, and then that saves it there in my feed. So if I hit exit, I can see that that one's been edited amongst my other images. So I'm going to open this one back up by double tapping it. And then the circle image on the bottom right, if you click that, you can share this, and you can either just copy it, so you can paste it into a text message, you can open it directly in Instagram, you can add it to Facebook, Twitter, message it to someone, email, all these different options. So the only one I use is Instagram, obviously. Sometimes I will go right here to save to camera roll. And once you hit save to camera roll, you can choose which resolution you'd like it to be at. I always export as actual size because then I often go and delete the original images, the ones that aren't edited once I've edited copies. So I'll often export them to actual size so I have copies of them. And then the other thing that's really handy is this button here that says copy edits. So let's hit copy edits. And it's really helpful if you happen to have another image that's taken in the same spot that you want to see what the exact formula you just used looks like on it. So I'm going to hit this exit here, and if we go back to this main feed, I'm going to choose the image beside it. I'm actually going to choose this palm tree image here because that was a similar setting. I'm going to hit that, then I'm going to hit this little circle in the bottom right corner, then I'm going to go to paste edits. So if I hit paste edits, did you just see that change? So now we have that there. So now we can see if we hit this little, the sliders there, you can see that it's applied the same preset. So let's just for a chance for you guys to see the difference once again. This is the edited one. I pasted that preset. Then if I hit clear, so that's what the difference was. It's super subtle because that's how I like my images. But it's a really easy, quick way to copy and paste. So those are really quick adjustments. So see how I can just select them all. Oops. Just select all 5 and I'll go into paste edits and then I can see, look how those all brightened up. It's awesome. So now I'm going to go into this first image. I'm not crazy about how this looks. It looks a little too bright for me. So I'm going to go in and lower this exposure a little bit. That's looking good. One more thing you guys can do, the sliders that I use pretty frequently are shadows and highlights. So this one here is highlights. So highlight save will take all of the really brightness in your image and dull it down a little bit. So you can see as I slide this, see the walls, how it gets kind of a little less crazy white. So depending on what kind of look you're going for, you can change that. And in the shadows, it saves the shadows, meaning anything that's super black, it'll bump up a little bit. So if you look at the difference of that lampshade as I do this, so it's a good way that if your images are quite underexposed, you can kind of cheat by bumping that up there. So I'm happy with this one now, and then I'm just going to scroll to the next one here. This would be a good example of, this one got really contrasty for my liking, so I'd lower the contrast, and then maybe go into these shadows and just bump that up by 1, and I might even save these highlights by a little bit. That's my office. That's where I'm sitting right now. And then right here, I would probably edit these highlights again. This is a beautiful lake house we rent for a week in the summer. Bring those highlights down. Might drop the exposure down. And I'm going to straighten this image a little bit so the horizon is straight. I want to show you one more landscape photo before we move on to some people shots. So here's how I'd edit this one. I'd start with my basic preset, which is the C1. It's just my favorite. You'll have to work to find your own. And I'm going to increase the exposure by 1, maybe 2. Let's do 2. And then increase the contrast by 1. I just like that little boost. I'm going to go over to this thermometer and increase the temperature by +2 because it's at sunset and I love my images to look nice and warm. I'm going to increase the tint by 1 because I love that magenta feel to my images. Then I'm going to save the highlights. See how the highlights, that really bright spot in the sunset, it just kind of pulls that back. So I'm going to do that a little bit. Then I'm going to go here and I'm going to crop it because I like the 1-to-1 ratio. Then I might straighten it just a little bit here. And there we have it. That's what I would Instagram. I think that looks awesome. I'm super happy with that. So you can see how just these little changes make a huge impact. So I'm going to show you, this is obviously the after, and then just pay close attention to your screens here. This is once again the formula of what we've done. And then I'm going to hit undo all so you can see the after, and then when I hit undo all, you'll see the before. So see just those super subtle changes, but make a huge difference when it comes to your Instagram feed. So the next thing I want to show you guys is how to edit a photo that's not very ideal lighting. There will be times where you'll want to post an image on Instagram and the lighting just isn't perfect. It's after dark, it's inside, there's like random fluorescent lights or whatever going on. So this is why I chose this photo to show you guys. It's not a very nice photo. The background's pretty blown out, but I like the moment. That's me and my husband. So I'm going to show you how I'd edit this one. So it's a little bit different. I'd start with C1, but I'd scale it like way back because I just really don't like how intense and green that makes it look. So I'll go to like +4 maybe. And then I'm going to increase the contrast by 1. And something I noticed right away is we need to pull back these highlights. So see in the back, That pulls it back way too much. Our faces look really kind of washed out and strange. But I'm going to pull it back to like +5 there. And this is where we'd use the skin tone feature here. So we talked about that earlier. And so as we go towards this side, it brings a little more green into our faces, and this side brings more of that magenta. So right here in the middle, I feel like our faces are a little bit too magenta. So I'm going to go and add maybe +2 of the green there. And then I'm going to fix this tint and see, okay, what does it look like if I go +2? It looks a little too magenta in the shadows. Looks a little too green there. Let's just play with these little tiny adjustments here. I think I like it -1, which is not typical for me, but just because of this setting here. And probably the next thing I do is play with the contrast again. Yeah, I'll leave it like that. Then I'm just going to check what other sliders are available to me. It's starting to look a lot better. It's probably what I would do. Maybe sharpen +1. And let's just see if we can push these highlights a little bit more back. Okay, so there we have it. So that is the final image. And just to show you guys a before and after, here's the after. And then once again, we're going to go here. There's the little formula. And that's the after, and that's the before. So see how much more put together that image looks. I really like the difference between the two, and it's something that I could now post on my feed. So one more image. Sorry, you have to look at our faces again. I don't take too many selfies or photos with other people, besides my husband. So this selfie is outside, but it's a little bit washed out. It's not very contrasty. I would never just post this straight to Instagram, but I'm going to show you a few little changes we can do. Once again, the C1 is like way too harsh for me at +12. So I'll probably go there. And then I see that we need contrast right away. We need to make those blacks a little bit blacker. So I'm going to do +2. And I don't like how the highlights are blown out, so I'm going to pull those back a little bit. See the difference on our faces there? Once again, this is too much, that's too little. So somewhere in between, that looks perfect to me. I really actually like the temperature how it is. I like the tint how it is. I'm just going to check the skin tone button and see what does that look like as we go from side to side. I think I'll have it at +1. That's perfect. Maybe lower that contrast a little bit. So let's play with this. And let me put that back up. Perfect. And you could even lower the saturation a little bit if it's looking a little bit too bright. So that's all I would do to that image. And then once again, let me show you the before and after here. So that's the after. There's the formula. So after, before. So these are so subtle differences that are going to make a really huge impact